Laura presenting on Down syndrome. So, Laura, whenever you're ready, you can begin.
Sure, thank you. So let me just pull up the presentation and we can get started. So can everyone see it?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, we're going to be talking today about understanding Down syndrome. And my name is Laura Aybar. So who am I? I'm a first year medical student and I'm also doing a research track with, medicine. And then I'm also a debate coach and I'm also a Best Buddies volunteer. And I did a 2-year molecular biology study. This is important because I'm going to be talking to you a bit about molecular biology and the genes and all that. So I did my first year in high school and then my first year in the second year when I started college. So this is a bit of a topic overview. We're going to go into genes and diseases, then chromosome maps, trisomies, what is Down syndrome, then we're going to be dismantling some myths, then diagnosis, life expectancy, social concerns and distress, and my personal experience with patients. So first we have genes and diseases. So we know that a gene is the basic physical functional unit of heredity. So genes are made up of DNA and every person has 2 copies of each gene, one from each parent. So they're containing chromosomes, which are in the cell nucleus. This is important because the Down syndrome is a chromosomal condition. So, what is a genetic disorder? So, this is a disease caused in a whole or a part of like a change in the DNA sequence. And this change um, goes from the normal sequence to a sequence that is mutated. So, genetic disorders can be caused by a mutation in one gene, mutations in multiple genes, combination of gene mutations, environmental or external factors, and damage to the chromosomes. However, not all genes abnormalities are bad. For example, the gene abnormality that causes sickle cell disease can also be used as protection for malaria, as we have seen in several regions in Africa. So, what is a chromosome and what is a pair? So, a chromosome is made up of very long strand of DNAs and it contains many genes. The genes on each chromosome are arranged in a particular sequence, and each gene has a particular location. So, we've seen gene 1, they have the chromosome 1, we have 2 pairs of chromosomes there, and this is called the locus. So, the pairing is essentially the 23 pairs that we contain as human beings, and that totals 46 chromosomes. There are 22 pairs of non-sexual or autosomal chromosomes, and 1 pair of the sex chromosomes that we know as X and Y or XX. The 23rd pair is the sex chromosomes, X and Y. So now we're going to talk about keragrams. We can see here that this is a basic and generic keragram because we have both the XY and XX chromosome, which is not always the case. We're going to see another one in a bit that's going to tell us a bit more about the patient. But essentially, this is a way to depict chromosomes. So this map is conducted when even in prenatal care or when we are little, this conducted to see our chromosome map. And the way the chromosomes are is basically the keragram, the way they're organized. They are also arranged in pairs, as we talked about earlier. So we have pair 1, 2, all the way to 22, and the last pair, the sex chromosomes, right at the bottom. So trisomies. This is getting more and more into the topic. So the term trisomy is used to describe the presence of an extra pair of chromosome. We also have monosomies, which is only 1 chromosome instead of 2. So here in this keragram, we can see that the patient has a trisomy in the chromosome 18, which is called the Edwards syndrome. And we also know that the patient is biological female because we can see X and X chromosomes here. Then this the keragram that we are going to be using today. So we have a trisomy in the chromosome 21. This is the Down syndrome, and we also know that the patient is female as well. So, what is Down syndrome? Well, as mentioned, the nucleus of each cell contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, half from each parent. So, Down syndrome occurs when an individual has a trisomy in the chromosome 21, meaning that they have an extra, partial or full chromosome in that specific place. So, for centuries, people with Down syndrome have been eluded in art and literature, and it was pretty uncommon to diagnose or make Keragrams, which is how we diagnose Down syndrome. And it was until the late 19th, actually, that we started seeing people being diagnosed with the syndrome. So they have been for centuries pushed down in society because of the way that this past literatures were portrayed, and they're still affecting people with Down syndrome. So we have three types. We have trisomy 21, the mosaicism, and translocation. So the trisomy 21, as I showed, was just another pair or three copies of this gene or chromosome in the 21 chromosome instead of the usual pair that we have. That mosaicism is a mixture of two types of cells. So some containing the, we can say usual 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs, and some containing 47. So this is a bit of a misunderstanding that all types is just another full copy of the chromosome. This is only the case of 1% of all Down syndrome cases. So we don't hear it much often about mosaicism. Then we have translocation, which is it can be in the chromosome 21, or we can actually have a partial copy of a chromosome attached to another gene. This is harder to see in a keragram because most pairs, when they have an extra one, meaning they are a trisomy, they have their own syndrome. For example, as I explained, chromosome 18, when they have a trisomy, is Edwards syndrome. So this is conducted by, apart from a keragram, we can see it by multiple keragrams, not just one. So this is a case of all 4% of all cases. So then the myths of Down syndrome. So Down syndrome is a rare disorder. This is not true. So Down syndrome is the most commonly occurring genetic condition, and one in every 691 babies in the United States is born with Down syndrome, or approximately 6,000 births per year. So today we have more than 400,000 people with Down syndrome living in the United States. So as we can see, it's not that rare, it's pretty common, but because of every misinformation that we get, we think that this is a rare disorder, and people use this as an excuse to exclude people with Down syndrome from normal activities. So then we have that Down syndrome is hereditary and runs in families. So this is a common misconception about Down syndrome. It is only hereditary in 1% of all instances. And it's not even all instances, because in the other 99% of cases with people with Down syndrome is completely random. It's not about the genes, or if your, let's say, mother had Down syndrome, then, oh, obviously it will run in the family. And this is only the case in 1% of all translocation cases. So as we saw, 4% of all cases are translocation. So of that 4%, just 1% runs in families. And lastly, we have that people with Down syndrome have severe cognitive delays. And this is not true. Most people with Down syndrome have cognitive delays, yes, but they're mild to moderate. Children with Down syndrome fully participate in public and private educational programs, and educators and researchers are still discovering their full potential and their full educational potential of people with Down syndrome. But it's sad to see that often they're excluded because some researchers from the 1910s have showed that they have cognitive delays. People tend to think that they are severe when they are not. Then we also have the diagnosis. So how is it that doctors diagnose Down syndrome? So we have two ways. So we have the prenatally. Prenatal screens are pretty common in pregnant women. And they estimate the chance of the fetus having Down syndrome. So this is not really the most reliable test, because even if the fetus has a chance of getting Down syndrome, it is not 100% accurate, right? So we also have the diagnostic test that we do in prenatal care that can provide a definite diagnosis. And then we have at birth. So Down syndrome is usually identified at birth by the presence of certain physical traits. And from here, they conduct a Keragram or a karyotype, which is essentially the same. And we have another genetic test called FISH, which is basically, again, using a Keragram, but it confirms the diagnosis in a shorter period of time. So it's basically like a fast COVID test instead of a PCR. So PCR would be like the most common, which is a karyotype, and then the FISH would be a rapid test. So we had the risk factors. So advancing maternal age is a risk factor and is the only risk factor that has been found in specifically women. So then you can be carriers of the genetic translocation for Down syndrome, but again, this is only 1% of all cases, so it's pretty rare. And then having had one child with Down syndrome increases the chances of you getting another child with Down syndrome. These are the only three known risk factors. Researchers are still on the way of developing more technology and finding out if we actually have more factors. So then we have the life expectancy. So 40 to 60 years ago, it was said that people with Down syndrome can live up to 40 years. But now, today, someone with Down syndrome can expect to live more than 60 years, depending on the health problems that they might experience. So, while I was doing my molecular biology study, some people asked me, like, how do people with Down syndrome have health problems? Like, what's the cause of death specifically? And this is mainly pulmonary to heart disease, which is pretty common since we have an abnormality in our DNA sequence. It's also pretty common to get another diseases apart from the syndrome. So now we're going to get into some social concerns and distress that people with Down syndrome might experience. So first we have the regression with decline in cognitive and social skills. This is pretty common since people with Down syndrome tend to be more emotional. They have their emotional side more developed. And this obviously causes more distress in their common activities daily. So they might experience a decline in cognitive skills, but it will be mild to moderate, as we saw before. So this is not really something they can hold on to. It's usually treated with a psychologist because it is some severe social and cognitive skills that they might develop, but this is only caused by an external factor. Then we have depression, social withdrawal, diminished interest, and coping skills. So this is when they are presented in an environment where they don't feel comfortable, or like they will experience some depression or anxiety, stress, which will then lead to social withdrawal or withdrawal from the activities that they do daily. For example, if they go to a school at school, and something happened, even the minimum key factor could set them in a social withdrawal because again, they are sensitive, they are emotional, and we all are actually, but they have that skill more developed, and they usually do coping skills again with a psychologist. And then we have the most severe, I would say, concern, which is bullying and stigma. Today, people still think that, let's say, if you have the gene for Down syndrome, that you may pass it to your children. That creates some sort of stigma in personal or interpersonal relationships. They also still think that they experience severe cognitive delays, which leads to bullying in high schools, college, and even as adults. And we also have that people with Down syndrome, even if they can express their feelings naturally, some of the previously mentioned concerns or distress can cause that their communicational skills can start to lower. This doesn't mean that they will lose or that they will be, let's say, scarred from or taken away their emotional skills. That only means that they will shut up and just don't really talk about what they're feeling. And this is mostly the case with children. And I like to believe that this is this is not at home. Respect should always be taught at home and then school. So this actually comes from a deeper and deeper ground. And while, yeah, in schools it's more likely that people with Down syndrome experience bullying or stigma, it is also as likely for them to experience it with adults. Because even if we can say, oh, they're old or they heard the wrong information, there is always a chance to inform ourselves. And this way, it's important to spread information and start dismantling myths about the syndrome, because then we have also, lastly, stereotypes. So, the stereotype, again, is cognitive delays, that they can't function well in society. And this is completely false. And it is a stereotype that they also cannot have interpersonal relations with someone that doesn't have Down syndrome, which is the main concern for them. Because obviously they will be in a community where initially their parents will like them to start going into groups or groups with for people with Down syndrome. This, for me, only shuts them off from society and continues to feed the stereotype that they cannot function well under any type of group in society. Doesn't matter if it's exclusively for people with Down syndrome or it's open for everyone. So it's important to take this point into consideration, because these are partly this is our the main part of the problem that we have of the myths, the stereotypes, the bullying and stigma. And this can also cause them, again, to have social withdrawal or have anxiety, depression, stress, which is not it's not great for anyone, especially with people that have their emotional side more developed than others. Then, okay, those pictures are awful, but those are all the pictures that I was in. So I have some experience with patients. So I was in the Best Body program. So how it works is that you have three positions. You can be the representative of your school, you can also be a buddy, or you can be a partier. So this partier are the people that organize the activities that we do, the fundraisings, or even the any type of activity that has to do with the club. Then we have the representatives, they take care of the money for fundraisings, they take up care of um, talking with the school and the and best bodies, and they usually just do all the administrative work. And then we have the buddies, and I was a buddy. So buddies are the ones that actually go to the parties and hang out with their buddy. So each person gets assigned a buddy. It doesn't really have to be someone with Down syndrome, but from my experience, my buddy had Down syndrome. So basically, we can see here we went to eat ice cream. We went to a party that was organized by my school. We also went to the movies. We went to similar places, and as we can see, they're very social. And we actually went with a friend of my buddy, which her name is Alexandra, and we went with her friend, and we had a great time, honestly. And it's great that we join these types of clubs, because then we have the opportunity to actually get away from the stereotypes and actually live and see how they see the world and how they manage and how they go out, and we go to parties and we go to movies, and it's fun. It was a fun experience. So then I also worked at New Horizons Club, which was the club for my school, and we also did some programs with a club that's called Adult Seed, which helps people with Down syndrome. essentially raises money towards research or just in general for activities or anything. Or yearly, my school has a particular trip that we go to the beach, and we go to Punta Cana, which is the most common beach here that tourists go. And we go and we have a great time. And lastly, I also worked at a Robert Reed Children's Hospital. And here I had the experience of diagnosis, of treatment, of actually getting into the medical side of the syndrome instead of only the social side. So it was pretty fun. I had a great time in all three of my experiences with patients. And I did this for 4 years. So 3 years of high school and then 1 year in college. And lastly, how to help. So usually I like to start with the words because yeah, fundraisings help, activities help, but the words are the ones that stick with them. So first, people with Down syndrome should always be referred to as people first. They're not a Down syndrome child. It is a child with Down syndrome. It is a person with Down syndrome. And I've seen today in 2021 people still using the term Down's child. So Downs is not a term. Downs is a despective term that is used to diminish people with Down syndrome. So Down's child or people that have downs, that does not exist, and we should always refer to them as people first because they are a patient, they're a person, they have a life, they're a human being, and then they have this condition. So which takes us to our second point, which is Down syndrome is a condition or a syndrome. It is not a disease. They are not experiencing a disease that can be treated. This is just a condition that they had to live with their life. And then people have Down syndrome. They do not suffer from Down syndrome. They are not afflicted by Down syndrome. They have, they are experiencing Down syndrome. They will never suffer from it because, again, you suffer from something that can have a treatment and that affects your daily life. This does not. Then we have typically developing or typical is prefer over normal because we invented as a society the term normal. What is normal? We don't know. So telling the people that have Down syndrome that they're abnormal is just rude, and it just dehumanizes them. And lastly, we have an intellectual disability or cognitive disability has replaced that term. I'm not comfortable saying that term, so it's on your screens. So that term was used years and years ago, and I can't believe people still use that to depict people not only that have Down syndrome, but that are suffering from diseases that can be seen as they are atypical or they're not typically developing. And they use this term to make sure that people that have Down syndrome feel excluded from society and to keep pushing the narrative that they have severe cognitive delays. And this is everything. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. This is my email, my LinkedIn, and I also use sourcing from the NDSS, Mayo Clinic, and a professor in University of Pittsburgh. This is all. Thank you. Okay, so what made me interested in researching Down syndrome is that I've always been really curious about genes and especially molecular biology because we can see how we're like everyone's different. No one's the same, no one's exactly or specifically the same. We can see that even if we have the same 23 pairs, or maybe we have 47 chromosomes, we can still see that we are very different. And seeing how that individuality worked was what made me go into research for Down syndrome. Also, I started after I joined Best Buddies, so that really inspired me to start researching and see how their life expectancy is, their diagnosis, see what they like, what they do not like. And yeah, that was pretty much my frame of reference. And is Best Buy is still offering volunteer opportunities? So I am aware that they are offering some opportunities, but that is usually through a school, college, or you can go individual. But I don't know what the process is right now because I did it with my school. But I can send you the information. You can write to me in my email, and I just hook you up with a person that can send you all the info. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, I am actually currently researching how we can start increasing the number for life expectancy from 60 maybe to 80s, which is the case. I'm not saying that every person with Down syndrome has a difficulty at 60 years old. That's not the case, but it's the frame of reference for the research. So we're trying to also look for what other type of gene can be involved because the mosaicism type of syndrome, it's not really well researched, so we're also working on that. I hope that answered your question. Thank you. I, Thank you very much to everyone. If there's more questions, you can write them in the chat and I'll respond if I can. So, yes, it is because of that, since it is a random mutation in your DNA sequence, and we know that not everyone has a mutation in their DNA sequence. That is the exact reason why it's not always hereditary or runs in the family. And we see that 99% of cases have to do with that mutation. And let's say, even if the mutation is mild or moderate, we can also see that people with Down syndrome or with any other syndrome can experience some sort of change even after they are born. So that is really interesting. We're still researching up on that, but that, yes, that is the reason. So